this year, 2023, will not be coming out until September this year.
Wow.
So all of this is to say that our motto and our work encompasses every student success, our number one priority. That is the guiding light, that is our compass, that we, every day, decisions are made based on this. Not only that though, I wanted to include every teacher's success as our number one priority. As important as our students are, our teachers are the ones who are in the classroom every day with our students, and we understand that. We understand, we see them, we hear them. We hear their stress, as Dr. Jackson had said, especially during this time of testing. And so decisions that are made here in this office is based on teacher needs. And we know that drives what happens in the classroom, because our teachers are our number one investment in terms of student success. And we love our teachers and look for it. And so with that being said, we have different team members who will come up here to share with you the system of support that we are providing our teachers and our students, so that we can, again, wrap around this time that we know, testing time, and across the state, that it is a stressful time for teachers. And so we wanted to share with you a little bit of what we're doing. So we're going to start with Miss Julie Abram.
Good evening. So I don't know about you, but just hearing Dr. Brown talk again about all the changes that are upon us with STAR gave me a little bit of caused me to sweat just a little more again. It's been a lot. There are a lot of changes before us, but we've been knowing about these changes for a long time. We've worked hard to put a lot of supports in place for our teachers and our campus principals to help guide them through this and ensure success. I want to talk a little bit about what those have been looking like. 4 layers of supports that we've put in place, just getting an early start, writing in all classes, focused and timely review, and leveraging data for instruction. I'm just going to take through those here real quick. So the first thing that we did when we got word that these things were coming down, not only the changes in accountability, but also the changes in STAR, we worked hard to get an early awareness and to be real proactive about what we were going to do. We started with online testing last year, if you recall. We knew that online testing was coming, so we made the decision last year to move all of our students online so that we could get that change ahead of us. This year, we spent a lot of time looking at STAR redesign, really helping our teachers understand what the redesign was going to mean, what were those test questions going to look like, but then also what is it going to mean for instruction? How is that going to translate into different instructional practices? We spent a lot of time in August and during our back to school time really helping them understand what that was going to mean, and putting forth some instructional expectations or recommendations about what was going to help leverage instruction to ensure success on those new item types. We focus on writing, as Dr. Brown mentioned. Writing, if you recall, we used to test writing in 4th grade and 7th grade. And we haven't tested writing in 2 years. We did not test writing last year, if you recall. So this year, we get to test all grades in writing for the first time, in 4th and 7th grade, the first time in 2 years. So writing, we knew, had to be a real push with our teachers, and reminding ourselves of what great writing instruction looked like for those of us who had taught it, and for those who it's new to, really teaching them what that looks like. Because writing, in terms of an SER, we call them our short constructed responses, are in social studies and science tests now, in addition to the writing that you would expect to have in the ELA classroom as well. We did a lot of practicing with new item types. We provide our students as often as possible online testing opportunities for CBAs or common classroom assessments. We use Eduphoria as an online testing platform, and it allows us to practice in some of those new item types. Many of our teachers have explored and practiced with formative assessments in the TFAR system using the Cambium platform that would be used for testing. So we've really tried to ensure that students and teachers have been familiar with those item types as often as possible. And of course, using the interims this year as a measure of progress monitoring so that they're all in the platform early, so that platform is familiar before testing. And then of course, just making sure that we're practicing ECRs, which is the extended constructed response that you'll see in ELAR, and then the short constructed responses that you'll see in science and math. Science and social studies. As I mentioned, we've been practicing online testing since 2021. The 3 C's has been the instructional recommendation and the instructional priorities this year, which means any instruction that's going to really target how the new way that students are being tested has to focus on classroom work that is about comprehending the information, connecting the information to new ideas, and then being able to communicate your thoughts in a coherent manner, whether it's in speaking or in writing. So we call that the big 3 C's. So those are some of the early things that we did to try to be proactive about providing those supports and awareness. As I mentioned, writing is a big deal this year, and it's something that we have been working on since day one, really just helping our teachers remember what good writing looks like, helping our students remember what good writing looks like, and really unifying our expectations for writing instruction across the grade levels. We created common strategies for ECRs, all grade levels, so that we were talking the same language as an entry point for writing scaffolds. And the same thing with SCRs. And I didn't put an example up here, but our instructional team came up with the Bulldog two-step for the SCRs, so that we had a common language in science and social studies classrooms, and talking about how to use writing in the content area. We've also, as Dr. Brown mentioned, been really looking at the reading that we put in front of students in the ELAR classroom. Historically, we in ELAR like to read fiction and poetry and drama, but the test is demonstrating that the passages that students will be exposed to aren't just the typical ELAR passages. They are also going to be coming from science texts, social studies texts, and so they'll be asking students to comprehend and respond in writing to passages outside of English historical passages, if that makes sense. So kids can also read a fiction, have a fiction passage on the assessment, but they could also have something from a science textbook or an article from a social studies or a historical document to also read and respond to. So really trying to ensure that we provide cross-content practice in our reading and writing. We joke a lot about what's your prove it, because kids have to be able to prove their ideas with evidence from the text. And so that's kind of been a tagline with our instructional coaches and in the classrooms. Students are no longer able to just say what their opinion is. They really have to be able to back up their opinions with evidence from the text. So that's really been a focus of all the writing that we do in the classrooms, ensuring that text evidence is something that students use. In the past, that's not been something that has been tested on STAR. And then lastly, just ensuring that our teachers are really in the work with calibration opportunities, sitting down with student samples, not only samples that our students have written, but also samples that the state has provided as exemplars or as rangefinder papers, and looking at those rubrics that the state has put forth to really understand what writing scoring is going to look like. What is a 5? What is the state saying a 5 is going to look like? So just really working on that. The third layer of support that we've provided is really trying to ensure that we have a very focused review period prior to STAR. This is something that we were very intentional about this year. Starting in February, we had a TOT, a trainer of trainers model of each campus brought an instructional team to training, and we talked about and trained on what does good review look like. Lead Forward came to help us and provide that support. And then we unified our expectations across the campuses to ensure that review time, the 10 to 12 days out prior to STAR, which is, by the way, it started yesterday, is really focused, it's really intentional, and it's really unified. So every subject is starting 10 to 12 days out of their assessment. We know that we can't teach all the curriculum, so they're focused on 3 to 4 standards of importance, whether those are high yield standards or those standards that are what we call deepest holes, problem standards, standards that students tend to struggle with on the assessment. They're focused on that learning within the next 10 to 12 days. The strategies of instruction are highly engaging. We want kids to be excited about learning. We want them up. We want them moving. We want them talking. We really want them focused on communicating, connecting, and really understanding what the content, and making sure that there's no new in review. Right? We don't want to teach anything new right now. We're just reviewing. So really getting strategic about those expectations across the district, and then looking hard at groupings. How can we, I call it the shell game, but how can we ensure that we have all hands on deck and that we're really making sure to small group students appropriately to ensure the highest yield for moving students forward. As Dr. Brown mentioned, growth is going to be a big part of how we demonstrate our success here in the district on the new accountability system, and that has been our focus with this focused review. And the fourth layer of support that we've really worked hard on this year is just leveraging data to inform instruction in very systematic ways. And I'm going to turn this over to Justin Bedford. He is our coordinator for data analytics, and he's going to talk a lot more about what that looks like and the things that he's put in place to help inform instruction with data.
President Yonda, members of the board, Deputy Superintendent Jackson. My name is Justin, and I'm here to present how we present data and how we give data to our principals for support. So in the beginning, we had really two questions. How do we give this data for support, and when can they receive it? So we thought of this by solving both those problems with two things. We started with a data scoring timeline. So with that, we garnered a list of every single assessment that is being gathered throughout the year and gave a timeline for when one scoring is going to be scored and when the data can be present on the portal, which we'll discuss in a second. And so with that, after we figured out when data was going to be presented, we realized, well, this data needs to be stored in a centralized location. So we created the portal. And with the portal is it's an online centralized location where each school has its own respective folder, along with folders for each assessment and any requested data that the principals or maybe any instructional leaders may need for intervention. And so in the portal, there are the reports that we present to them is reports for leadership and PLCs. This can include, and you'll see on the next slide, there is like CBA data we provided for them to, we provide for them so they can present and give it to their instructional leaders, and as well as BAS and interim data, which will be used for tracking performance. And with that, we thought it was a good idea to not only give it in a sense of how a campus will look in a globalized and maybe an overarching view, but more in a sense of how can we get to a student level and how can we track how students perform on assessment to assessment, and then track trends from there. And so with this, that's how we get to the progress monitoring. How can we monitor students and how they perform on different assessments? So here's an example of how data is shown. So this is an example of one of the CBAs. What is shown is average scores for each CBA, along with performance for how STAR reporting is. And so you can see they're color-coded for how they are scored in accordance with each other, as well as averages for each campus in accordance with approaches, meets, and masters. And so that is more of a globalized, as I stated, a globalized outlook on how each campus can view it. But with each table, there's a drop-down menu that can show you how students perform throughout each assessment. And with the filters that are also provided, that can also allow each school to look at different sub-ops that they may need to focus on, maybe for their high focus or two lowest performing ethnic groups. And so with the tracking I was mentioning earlier, this is one of the most important things we were using so far, and ones that we provided for instructional leaders. It is our tracking systems. So with this, we have tracking systems for our K through 2 for BAS data. We have for STAR data, we have one for CBA data, and then we also have some for our interim data. And so this is an example of what it looks like. So these are how students performed on each respective major assessment, being last year's STAR, both MAPs, and then MAP interim. And with that, you can see how students perform throughout the course of their tenure throughout the year. And with this, you can also garner a trend for how they're performing. So for example, the top one, students scored in approaches on MAP STAR, and now they're scoring approaches on MAP interim, which means they're sustaining progress in how they're performing. Whereas the third line, you have a student who performed approaches through the first 3 assessments, but then did not meet in MAP interim, which means they're sliding their trend. That means they can recommend a intervention of some kind in order to assist that student. And with this, there's also a probability that is provided for a prediction for how students will perform on the STAR test.
So each line represents a student.
Correct.
In this particular example?
That's for each level. Elementary, middle, and high school has their own tracker for each assessment.
Right. The far column we took out because it was.
Right, of course.
Yes,
But that's each student.
yes, and so
That's really drilling down,
yeah,
that's
so
awesome.
so each campus has their own, and their, they can, and like the filter you saw on the CBA one, they can filter by sub-pops, you can filter by teacher name, you can filter by your own campus, grade, etc.
Right.
Just so they can really drill down to which students and how they're performing.
Awesome, it's impressive.
And finally, this is our current and most up-to-date for how we are providing support for our campus. And so this is a mock growth chart. You've probably seen it if you've looked at the STAR, like the outlook for how campuses score for Domain 2. So this is a mock one for how a campus scored comparing last year's STAR to this year's interim. And so each square represents how a student performed, and of course, so left side being STAR, the top being interim. And so, again, this is the globalized outlook that we can look at for growth for a campus, but it doesn't really answer the question for how can we figure out which students are performing, how are they performing, how do we know which students are in the red, how do we know which students to congratulate in the green. And so with this, we've also provided a way in order to delve into each individual group of how they perform. So if you can kind of see underneath each box, there's a group number for each square, and so each, and on the student, there's a student data file. In each file, there is a group assigned to each student for how they perform in accordance with the interim and the STAR. So, for example, one we're focusing on right here is on the bottom line, on the second to the right, so group 2. It is students who scored last year masters in STAR, but scored a meets this year interim, which means yes, they're still meeting in STAR, but they're not giving you the growth point, which is it's a big no-no. So a way that we helped with the principals in order to figure out who these students are and provide their much needed support, especially with STAR coming very soon, is we found a way to figure out who the students are. So in the student data file, there's filters that they can use, and so each group has its own. And you can also filter by campus, so you won't have to get the entire districts. And you can figure out the 21 students that mastered last year and that this year, along with how many grade points they're giving you. And and so just to summarize, we're here to provide support wherever means necessary. It's all really new, and so we're kind of building from the ground up, but right now we're just really trying to provide data as quick as possible and as fast as possible to these principals so they can provide support, especially with a timeline running really low.
Looks pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, thank you.
A lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah, Board, I just want to say
Very
this is some
impressive.
very sophisticated stuff, and he's helped to develop it, I mean, this year. And so we want to thank you for what you're doing for our school district as well,
Thank you.
along with the curriculum team.
Was the portal like created in-house, or is it?
Yes, it's in-house.
And will they have access to the portal by campus, or will y'all have to distribute that
It is
information?
shared
It
via
is shared,
each
okay.
campus, and then principals can share whatever.
However
files
they want.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Now, next is the retreat, right?
He's a tough act to follow. That is really impressive. I don't have any.
Okay, what you got this
I
one?
didn't build anything. I didn't build anything. I'm just telling you. But continuing on our theme of supporting the campuses, Special Education Department is charged with being able to identify and provide supports and services to the students that have unique learning and behavior needs. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight, how much we've grown. So just to give you an idea, in the 2021-22 school year, we identified an additional 107 special education students for the entire school year. This year, as of yesterday, we had identified 144, and we still have 2 more months of school. So that's awesome. That means our campuses, our campus principals, our teachers, the related service staff in my department are doing an outstanding job of identifying students who have unique learning needs, learning challenges, as well as significant behavior needs. And as we identify those, we're growing. So I put a chart that's a little hard for me to read here. I should have made it bigger, but you can probably see that we started in August with 942 special ed students, and now we're up to 1,086. And you can see by month the campuses that have grown. Nearly every campus has grown. Secondary, some of them have stayed the same, but if you take a look at College Park, for instance, they have really grown, and that's our early childhood program. We do an outstanding job monthly of holding child find meetings. Parents can bring their children, excuse me, to get screened, and then we decide if they need to go forward with testing. A lot of times they do. We are identifying a tremendous amount of students who have speech language disorders that we're able to help. So part of that is what you see at College Park. But I just wanted you all to see the amount of growth that we've done. Our staff has handled it amazingly. They're doing a really good job. Our campus principals, our teachers, they're doing a phenomenal job, but we are growing. So going on from there, this is some of the programs and services that we provide in LaPorte ISD special programs. This is not all of them, but this is a good look at what we do. So currently, this is the number of students that we have in each of these programs. In early childhood, we have 64 students. Notice that we have in speech, we have 449 students out of the 1,090 something that 86 we have now. 449 of those are getting speech right now, so that's amazing, and our speech team does a very good job with them. We have majority resource inclusion students. We have 559 right now. That means those students are sitting in a gen ed classroom, or they get pulled part of the day to get some intensive instruction. Our behavior support program, currently we're supporting 55 students. Our social academic interpersonal learning, or SAIL, that is primarily our students with autism and other communication disorders. We have 78 students in that program right now. And then our focus program is what you probably knew as life skills when you were a younger student, what I knew as life skills, same program. We call it focus now. And we have 146 students district-wide there. And then of course, at the SPC, we have the Bulldog Bridge, which is an amazing program, and that's our 18 plus students, and we have 10 of those. Those are adult students with intellectual disabilities that we find ways for them to contribute in the community, get jobs, or maybe go into day hab, whatever they need to be successful adults. And then out of district placement is something we also provide, and that is for students who have such significant behavior difficulties that we cannot manage them safely for themselves or for the staff. So we post them at a school until they're able to maintain acceptable behavior that's safe for them and for their teachers. So that's what we have there. Next, I want to talk about the TEA audit that we underwent this spring, which I just want to add, should have probably been put on the job description, but it wasn't. I had no idea. No, I'm kidding. So every 6 years, TEA says that you're going to go through a cyclical audit. And they pull 24 random folders. We were very blessed that we didn't have an on-site visit. We were audited at the same time as HISD, and for that I'm grateful. So,
No, everything's acronym. DMS, what's that?
it is differentiated monitoring and support. So every year we have to do a rating scale to say how we're doing, and then every 6 years they come in, or in our case, they pulled folders, we sent them paperwork, and they review it. So they go over 7 areas, and the areas that they did were, if you haven't been in an ARD meeting, that's an IEP meeting that has to be held annually, at least annually, for every student that receives special education. So they have folders. They're digital folders now, and we send them to TEA, and they look to see if, one, did we have that ARD annually at least? Yes. Then we look at evaluation. Are we within timelines of those? IEP content, are their goals relevant and appropriate related to their disability? IEP development, are we developing appropriate IEPs? Are we monitoring those? IEP implementation, how are we delivering that in the classroom? State assessment, are we making sure kids are taking the right test? Because STAR test is one test, but we also have the STAR Alt, and the STAR Alt is for students with significant cognitive disabilities. They take a different version of the STAR test. It's STAR test nonetheless. We are still tracked on their progress, but it looks a little different than what a general education student would take. And then transition, which is how well do our students do in society after they graduate? So in special education, we have to track where are they when they graduate. So that's something they also look at. So we got our preliminary results about 2 weeks ago, And I am incredibly proud to say that I inherited a fabulous department because all of the things that they looked at are from last year. So Cindy Anderson and Jennifer Upshaw need a tremendous amount of credit. We had 5 clerical errors. 5 clerical errors. It's amazing. We will get our final report, which I'm happy to provide to you April 28th. I don't know if Dr. Jackson will want me to come up and present that. Happy to do that, but preliminarily 5 clerical errors, which we were able to submit documentation and change. Very proud of that, very proud of our department, very proud of my team. So that is the special education update.
One question.
Yes, ma'am.
On the slide prior,
Sure.
on the out-of-district placement, is that number up or down
is
from
up.
prior years?
Yes, ma'am. It is up this year.
Okay.
And I anticipate it may go up again next year. And I'm making arrangements for that.
Okay.
So with tracking, once they are out of our care, how? I mean, I know with CCMR, it's technology. So then how do you do that with your special population?
So TEA does it, and it's very difficult. What they do is they call the last number that the school district has on file. So before a student graduates in their annual ARD or their annual IEP meeting, we have to get that information, and we try to let the parents know this is going to happen. They're going to call, they're going to contact your student, and they call, and oftentimes they don't get an answer. They have an email and they don't respond. So they are working on a better way of tracking that, but right now it's not a great tracking system because a lot of times, you know, kids go off and they make different decisions, they move away, and then we don't have a way to track them. But that's the system we have for now.
Is it possible to have a child that's in multiple categories?
Yes, absolutely it is. So a resource inclusion student could also be a sales student, and they could also, or they could be a BSP student. Yes, definitely. Many of our students are in more than one category. We do have quite a few though that are speech only, which a lot of young kids are, and then they exit pretty quickly.
You made the comment that a lot of, not all of them I know, but most of them are in general ed, right? So what would be the percentage, like on a per student basis, per classroom of, is there a quota on how many one teacher can have in any given class? And what is that, how's it gone up the last couple of years?
There isn't, and campus principals get to decide how that looks. I would say there is no hard and fast rule. However, I would say as best practice, you should never have more than a third, and I think a third is a lot. We try to keep it lower. Sometimes it just depends on the staffing. So at elementary campuses, for example, they have one special education teacher. That can get very difficult when your numbers get high.
Sure.
They do a great job, and we also have paraprofessionals that do a great job of supporting them, but sometimes those numbers get high, and we definitely are always looking at ways that we can shift staff around to make those numbers lower.
How does it work? I've heard, I don't know if it's a rumor, but with special education designations, you can't discipline. Is that a misnomer, or what? How does that work?
So, well, it depends. You definitely have to have a special meeting if you're going to remove the child from the setting they're in. So, I'm going to give you a secondary example because that's my background and that's what I'm most comfortable with. But so at the secondary level, if a student commits an offense at school that would get any other student sent to the AEP, special education students can and are disciplined. However, prior to that discipline meeting, we have to hold another meeting to see if the discipline or the infraction that they have committed is related to their disability or direct and causal to their disability. So say that it's a student who has ADHD and they run through the locker room and they pop somebody in the back of the head. And then they run off, and it's just sometimes that could be considered related to the disability. But if a student gets injured, we still have to deal with that. So that's one of those types of things. The other would be that's really the only time you have to have that meeting is if you're removing them from the campus. At any other time, they can be disciplined like any other student.
I guess what I'm getting at is, like in my personal scenario, I think I mentioned this last time. my second grader, I guess it's like the first week of school, so they got an extra 30 minutes. He came home all excited. He got 30 minutes extra recess because a kid in his class was throwing desk and just completely disrupting the classroom. Instead of taking that kid out of the class, the whole entire classroom had to go out to the recess. And my kid loved it, right? But as a teacher, the focus is on STAR and improving scores. How is it possible for somebody to learn or to teach? How did anybody teach if you got a third of your class, up to possibly a third of your class of disruptions? And I'm not saying it's all special ed, I'm not trying to group them on it, but anybody that's disrupting your class and you cannot remove them from your class, what is our policy on that? What is our plan to help support our teachers? Could it be I've heard other districts have personnel pairs or whatever it may be, they can come in and actually, they're certified to remove kids and sit with them or whatever it is. I know they do the best they can, I know, but it's trying, but what is our district policy? How are we handling these issues? As you said, it's increased by 144 students just on the special education side of it. So
We've made some additions to staff this year to support our campuses that have had some of those issues as well. To address that, this year we're going through staffing right now, just looking at how we're going to be able to address that better. But Jeff, we're doing some of the same things that you're hearing from other districts. When campuses need additional support, Billy brings it to the table, to cabinet, and we have conversations about it.
But why does it, I apologize asking you, maybe not, but why do we have to, if it's one kid in a class of 24 kids, or whatever it may be, one disruption, and the whole entire class is displaced?
I've heard you say that before, and I probably should have investigated it when you said it immediately, but we need to have some more conversations about what are we doing to make sure that we're not disrupting the whole classroom for one issue.
100%. So, if I may, quickly, what we do is, if that student is already identified in special education, sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. We're actually seeing an increase in students that are not yet identified. That definitely helps us identify. If they are identified, it's easier for us to come together, have an ARD meeting, and perhaps they need to be placed in a BSP program on another campus, and we have those on elementary, middle, and high school campuses. If they're not in special education, then we have to go through the testing process before we can make a decision like that. Now, gen ed discipline can handle that as well, but I can just speak to the special education process.
But I don't think it's our policy to remove the whole classroom for one kid.
And that's what I wanted to address. So,
Right.
so from what you have shared, again, like Dr. Jackson said, we will look into that. But one of the things that is not a policy that we do that. But the other piece is with the staffing that we're doing this year, because we don't have a policy on the number of special ed students in a classroom, we do sit down with the principal and the leadership team and look at numbers to see in terms of staffing and how many students are in that class. But in terms of how does a teacher handle a student who is special ed or someone who's disruptive and the whole class now has to be disrupted in learning, well, we're going to look into those things because that should not happen too. That should not have a policy, right? But it's not a policy.
And please look, it's not hard to figure out what school my kids go to, right? So I'm not trying to single out that school. They do an amazing job. I'm friends with a lot of educators, and the overwhelming feedback I get is we want to be able to teach. And all these things are amazing, analytics and all these things, from a high level perspective, but a back to basics approach is you have to let them teach. And they can't teach if a kid is constantly disrupting. And I don't think I'm crazy at that. I think that's a very common thing, not just in LaPorte, everywhere.
I agree.
I just don't know what we do about that.
To what degree, how many support staff do we have per campus? Is there?
Well, it varies depending on the programs they have. So a campus that has a behavior program has some more support staff because they have, 9 or 10 students there that are in a self-contained setting, or they have inclusion behavior where they have parents that push in. On a campus, if you don't mind if I use your campus as an example, so they don't have a behavior program there. So they just have their resource inclusion teacher and the inclusion paras. What we do is if we identify a student that has those needs, their campuses are changed to meet the needs of those students. Unfortunately, it's not always a quick process. We have to follow federal timelines,
right,
and we have to do those things. But I do hear you.
It could be like 6 months or more. Right.
It shouldn't be quite 6 months, but sometimes it can be a whole semester.
Well, and that's in terms of special
education, yes.
Now, again, speaking in terms of when we hear teacher concerns on a campus, we try to move quickly as possible at the moment. We have central office folks we have CIS, and Jancy's going to talk a little bit more about that. But we try to bring in, as quickly as possible, someone to help with the issue at hand.
And if I'm not mistaken, even when we did not have a a support staff, central office folks were even
Right.
dispatched over there, right?
Absolutely.
Correct? To kind of go support some of those things.
Often, yes, sir.
It's an issue, Jeff, and we're gonna continue to work on it. It's an issue.
Absolutely, we are.
And, you know, it's not throwing money on it, it's really getting the right staff to kind of help with that,
Yes, sir.
right? And it's
And
something
also
that we have to deal
professional
with.
development
And
training
PD,
too.
Yes.
Lots of training for that, absolutely. Thank you, Billy.
Thank
And so
you.
that leads,
No, I said thank you.
Yes, thank you.
that leads into actually the conversation we're going to have now with Jancy. She's going to talk a little bit about the support that we currently immediately do for campuses in terms of student behavior, student discipline, and then what are our options for next year.
How are you guys doing? We know that right now spring is a stressor for students, it's a stressor for teachers, it's a stressor, just the spring is a stressful time right now. And we want to share, academic attention to academics and the focus that you saw on academics is important. Also, our emotional well-being of our students is important as well. And we know that without that, academic success doesn't happen. They have to feel safe. They have to have a relationship with someone on their campus. And that's and those are the things that we want to make sure that we're doing and that we're supporting and that we're relaying that information to you as well. So here's what we currently have. We do have our counselors. Our counselors are working on interventions, accommodations, supports. They do individual counseling. They do group counseling. They work with parents and teachers. And probably I could put like bullets under each one because they just do so much. We have a wonderful array of counselors for our district, but there's a lot of things that they do as well. At the secondary level, we have communities in school. So our communities in school at our junior high and our high school communities in school, they help layer the supports for the counselors. So they're doing group lessons, they're doing interventions, they're doing pullouts, they're doing basic needs. They provide food and clothing for students as well. We have community youth service, so we have a social worker we employ a social worker who connects us with all those outside services that we may not know about or that we need to be connected to, especially for parents. And then we do have our Bakota youth workers who do our substance prevention education. So we have one at DAP, and we also have one that works at Lomax and one that works at LaPorte Junior School. So these are just what we currently have right now. As far as our emotional supports for kids, we'd like to expand these programs. We'd like to give more help as we listen to our teachers, as we listen to our counselors, as we listen to people that are saying these are the things we wish could happen. Here are some things that we want to recommend, and also like to come back and kind of discuss the specifics on implementing each of these things, but really expanding communities and schools to our Baker campus and our elementaries. Wow, what an influence they've had on our secondary level, but having that extra person to provide interventions, to do group counseling, to provide resources, and also to provide our bullying prevention program that we will start next year per grade level. So each grade level student will receive a bullying prevention program, so they'll go through the curriculum. And having the CIS program workers help with that will just help partner with those counselors as we do our counseling in the classrooms. Also, adding a support counselor, especially for our DAEP. We know that we had, as things shift, and as we see students who are being placed at DAP over and over again for substance abuse, and it's repetitive, and the numbers are increasing, and we see a need. So what help are they getting? Do we just continue to place the same students over and over again? What can we do? So looking at putting a support counselor at our alternative campus, DAP, to really work individually with those students and provide them a curriculum and provide them counseling and work with their parents. Because because it's not just one thing. You've got to have all those pieces together. And then also having parent education for our junior high, because we know, the vaping and the THC and the things that we're seeing, and we're trying to get as connected as we can to other resources in our district and our community and other districts too. But we see the younger the students are getting, the more exposed they are. I mean, it looks like candy, it looks fun, all the little things that they have, they market those for children. And so to provide parents with education on if you see this, what does this look like? This may not just be the normal candy you see, but helping the junior high parents, especially transition from Baker to 7th and 8th grade, and just giving them education and helping them, because as parents, most of us have children, and these are things we didn't know about years ago. We didn't think that these were things we were going to need to look for, but we do, because every one of our children are exposed to those. And then lastly, look at implementing a district-wide behavior management program for our district. And what that looks like is supporting classroom teachers, giving classroom teachers tools that they can use every day so that they're spending less time on behavior issues and behavior infractions and things that they're seeing, and spend more time on instruction. And so those are the programs we're vetting. Those programs, we have committees to kind of decipher which one is best for LaPorte after listening to teachers and our staff. But supporting the teachers is important, because we don't want them to get burnt out, and we don't want them to get frustrated. And then we also want our whole school environment, the climate at the campus to change, because expectations are clear, behaviors are clear, the consequences would be clear. So it wouldn't just be one thing, it would be aligned to that as well. And so lastly, I just kind of put that, hearing, when we go and we hear everything, that's very passive. Sometimes we need to do more listening. And so when we listen to people and we talk to our teachers and our staff and our faculty, move where the need is. Shift your resources where the need becomes, because there's things you can't forecast. But when you see needs for behavior, when you see needs for DAP, for intervention, being able to just shift those for our district and help our community. So I hope to come back and talk more about those, but I just wanted to give you kind of a little insight. Yes.
I have a question about, I guess, like counseling at the high school.
Yes.
How are we monitoring? I know with counselors, a lot of that is, a lot of academic plans
It is.
and scheduling and all that. And how are we monitoring that a certain percentage of that time for counselors is actually devoted into some form of working with students, counseling, doing the guidance counseling program?
Well, we do follow like the 80-20% rule from TEA, which says we need to be seeing students and working with students 80% of the time. And so that is something that we do follow. The state of Texas has counselors tracking all kinds of information.
Right.
So they're tracking credits, 8 years, we're tracking CCMR, we're tracking certifications, we're tracking performance acknowledgments. So those are the things that we're responsible to track. However, we are still in the business of kids. So we're still working with kids individually, working with their parents, creating their 4-year plan. It's leaned more at the high school with data, and it's leaned more with scheduling. So they are going to have that be a priority, because without putting students in the right classes, they don't graduate from high school. Without tracking their STAR scores, they don't graduate from high school. So there is that piece that's leaned, so their time is spent doing that, but those are components that really working with the kids, because we're trying to get them to graduate and prepare them for post-secondary afterwards. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just got how as a district we're keeping track of that, I guess my question. I know it's 80-20, but how are we keeping track of that?
Well, they have a calendar that they have to track their what they're doing. So scheduling, they put their scheduling when they're working on individual meetings with senior parents and they meet individually with seniors. So those are things that they put on their calendar and they share with me and outline.
Supervise that.
Yes. But as we meet monthly, those are the things that they're supposed to be working on too. At the high school, we do have our Aaron Webb, who's our crisis counselor, who's doing, the term, we have this crisis term counselor, and we're like, why did we call her crisis? Because when she calls parents, they're like, what's a crisis counselor? Well,
should probably say support, so parents don't get so hysterical when she calls. But she is leaned to do so many more proactive things with students, that the crisis and the things that she was seeing at the beginning of the year, she's able to do groups with the students. She works with our CIS worker who's new there. They do groups together. There's a lot of support there, and they're working with the counselors. So everyone is kind of on the same page. So there's multiple layers of support for the high school staff as well.
As a follow-up to that, do you feel that the counselors have enough clerical support to be able to be a counselor?
You know,
Especially at the high school level.
I do feel that they feel, and this is what they say, that before they had, I think they had a counselor's clerk. So before me, previous years, they had a counselor's clerk. So they talked about a counselor's clerk. And that was the person that entered the data. So they did talk about having that. They took 504 away from the counselors. And so the counselors weren't responsible for entering the data at the high school. So at that time, there wasn't a need for the 504 clerk. Do I feel like, you know, they need clerk data? I mean, I do feel like if shifted back to them, they would need data to help them with that. But right now, they're not the person that's entering that data into eSchool. Right. They don't have that at this point. The assistant principals have it, yes, and it is in the
elementary
eSchool
level though.
The elementary counselors do work with the 504, so they are the ones at the elementary level who are entering the data into eSchool.
So.
And they used to have counseling
We
clerks.
have, like, need the most of our counselors they're having a lot of data entry.
Yes, and that is something that we probably need to listen and work on to forecast in the future, because if it's a time consuming and they're spending so much time entering in eSchool, how to alleviate that for them. And I'm a component of having them work with the students and not just in the office typing, you know, the information. I'm all for that, because they're experts at what they do, and needing them out and working with kids. But they are responsible for entering the 504 at the elementary level.
And not to talk about, we didn't talk about junior high, so does junior high follow the high school platform, or do they follow
It depends. Some of the assistant principals do it, and the other ones, the counselors do it. So I think they work together. But at the elementary, for sure, it is the counselors.
Sounds like we may need to think about that as we move into budget discussions.
Okay.
And I would certainly entertain that, Madam Trustee. I just want to caution us all in that I could bring 25 teachers up here right now that says that they could use an assistant in their classroom.
Everybody.
And I'm not trying to create an argument or trying to create any friction, but I hear the same thing from our staff in the classroom. I mean, I just don't know how you put an assistant to all of these folks, because we just don't have a bottomless pit of funding to do those kinds of things. And I'm not saying I won't do what the pleasure of the board is, but I'm just saying, I guarantee you what Mr. Martin was just talking about, having additional folks in the classroom to help with supports with discipline. I guarantee you every classroom teacher could say the same thing, that they could use that. We've got to figure out how do we train people and how do we take things off of their plates. I don't know that giving everything that we need an additional something is going to be the answer. We will do whatever the board asks us to kind of work on and investigate, but it's just going to be hard to do. You know, I will do whatever y'all ask me to do on that.
And possibly with the expansion of the CIS program, that's something we can look at too, to alleviate some of that, to partner with that data piece that may be the hindrance on the elementary
The reason why I
campus.
bring it up, just for the sake of the conversation, Mr. President, is I visited with the secondary principals yesterday, and each one of them said how overwhelmed they were by keeping up with 504 and chasing kids and every issue that. Does that make sense? And so everybody is overwhelmed, and I don't want to wag the dog, and I don't want to pretend like we don't want to help, because Lord knows that's my job, is to be here to support our people. But I listen to the secondary principals and elementary folks elementary principals talk about what their people have, and if we had a magic wand to give each one of them additional folks to make that happen, the problem is we do add those positions sometimes. And I'm not talking about these particular positions, but the work never goes away. And we just talked about some of the things that are coming down from Austin and Washington, for that matter, guidelines and mandates that we have to follow. I just don't know what the answer is to some of that. I really don't, and I'm willing to have a strong conversation about it. I just don't know that additional this and additional that is going to be able to fix it. It might help a little bit, maybe it won't.
Well, and to piggyback on what you said too, with what's the discussion in Austin, because everybody in education is overwhelmed, and the people in Austin don't realize that no matter what position you're in, you know, first things first is the students that are in front of you, and you spend your 8 hours while you're working dealing with the students because they're priority number one. And then any paperwork or wherever on the side you have to do in your own time, and many people are not getting compensated for. And so, but the people in Austin don't truly understand that and value that. So it's very frustrating.
So far, I see on your, one of the previous slides on communities and schools, it says individual intervention. Is that something that like, they do? I think I've been told they do actually help sometimes with behavioral issues.
They do.
And so, and I know we're going to vote on another one tonight. Like, who's paying? The district's not. We don't allocate money to that. It's paid for by as a county resource.
We do.
It's number 9 in their proposal, shows the breakdown.
So we even use our Title I money for that, and so with our secondary schools, they use their Title I, they pay half the salary, and then CIS grant pays for the other half.
So how many, and I apologize, I should know this, but like how many do we have
right now.
people that are employed by CIS?
Yes, we have, the CIS, we have 3.
So we have one at the high school, dedicated to the high school, one at each of the junior highs, so that's 3. What we did is we had one right now who is currently at, is there another one right now?
No, just the CYS.
CYS. We use the CYS because we have 2 CYS. So we are utilizing that one CYS to be at one of our elementary schools, Bayshore, full time. And she was going at 2 different schools. For next year, the plan is we want to extend community schools because we have rave reviews in the work that they do with our students. Right, so we are extending it to Baker. So we're going to have a full-time CIS at Baker, and then we're going to have a full-time CIS at Bayshore, and then the other 6 elementary schools we're going to split 2-2-2. So one CIS will be at 2 elementaries, one CIS will be at 2 elementaries, and the other CIS at 2 elementaries. That will help us in terms of, like Dr. Jackson saying, with funding, because with the support of the grant with CIS, we're paying only half the salary of a CIS person that will be carrying out the campus.
Is that something that, obviously budget constraints, but like if we were to say we wanted to be one for every campus, is that something they would be willing to work with us on, or is it just, do they have a finite amount of people that can?
They can definitely find it, but we, again, because of budget, we were looking at, we would love to have it at every campus, but that again would be a cost that every campus would have, right? Because currently right now, our Title I money at the secondary is a little bit higher than it is at the elementaries. The elementaries use their Title I money for extended day, extended year, throughout the school year. And so we would have to find a funding if we wanted to have a CIS dedicated to every single campus at the elementary.
Again, I know that funding can make it fall out of the sky, but that'll be our best bang for the buck, right? So what you're saying is we are on the hook for half of it, and then
And they serve in many capacities,
Right.
not just the
yes.
interventions that they offer are
Yes, and the CYS that's at Bayshore now, they're limited because their agency has things that you can only see certain kids and only do, it's very constricted. So instead of having, having a CIS who can see every student on the campus, who can participate in everything that the campus is doing, really be a part of the campus and work with those individual kids. They attend all of our counselor trainings with us. So when we do behavior support training and we're doing one on Friday, they will be there. So they're going to getting every training that we're getting as well, because they're really our partner, at the campuses.
Thank you.
Hopefully you were able to get a quick gist of the work that we're doing in the academics team. And again, we just want to thank you for your continued support. We know there's a lot going on, and we are just here to support our teachers and our students and make report the best it will be. And I know it is. It will be. This year will be great with STAR. But I want just to remind you, on your desk you have the STAR flyer. We have a parent webinar tomorrow night for grades 3 to 8, and it is a webinar, so you can log in from home. And then we have one on Thursday night for high school parents. And it is to talk about STAR and then talk about where the data, when the data comes back in August, where they can find it in our family access center.
Is it gonna be recorded? Because I know April 13th, there's some other things going on that date, so I was just wondering if,
We'll record it and put it online also.
okay, awesome.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, team.
Thank you.
Good job.
Okay, we're gonna go back to item 7B, fiscal year 2024 budget process. Ms. McDowell?
Hey, good evening. I'm going to present the fiscal year 2024 budget process, which will include the steps taken to calculate the revenue and expense budgets for the general fund, the upcoming tasks, and a brief discussion regarding the 88th legislature session changes that could impact all of the school district funding. These steps follow along with the budget calendar given to the board in the January board meeting. They are in sync with what the Porte ISD has done in the past. So the first step is the CFO, myself, calculates the expense allocation for each campus based on the size of their professional staff, their enrollment, and their free and reduced percentage for that campus. I also calculate the expense allocation for each department based on their average actual expenses for fiscal year 21, 22, and then their budget for 2023. I met with each of the campus principals and secretaries in February to go over their current budget and explain the steps needed for them to calculate and enter their fiscal year 2024 budget into our finance system. And then the budget managers completed their budget entry for fiscal year 2024, and they sent their required reports to their supervisor for approval, and then they then forwarded on to me for review. All of these 4 steps were completed before spring break. All additional requested funds from the budget managers were reviewed by myself and Dr. Jackson to determine the need and the capacity of our budget. Staffing meetings are currently being held and have been held with campus principals, with HR and executive directors of elementary and secondary to determine staffing projections for the fiscal year 2024 based on estimated enrollment and the need for that campus. We received our certified estimate of the district's property values from our chief appraiser, and I use this information along with student attendance data and student type to calculate our estimated revenues for the fiscal year 2024 and our state funding template. Child nutrition and debt service revenue and expense budgets are also calculated and reviewed and entered into our financial system. So our next steps, we are having a May budget workshop, potentially in June also, to discuss our fiscal year 2024 budget in detail. At our June 13, 2023 board meeting, the board will adopt the general fund, debt service, and child nutrition fiscal year 2024 budget. In August, TEA will issue the final MCR, which is our maximum compressed tax rate, and that will be used to calculate what our M&O tax rate is for the district. This will possibly change the tax rate that we use in our adopted budget. It's adopted in June. At our September board meeting, we will have received our certified appraisal property tax roll from the chief appraiser, and the board will approve the 2023 tax rolls. And in our October meeting, the board adopts the tax rate for the district. So you can see starts in January and goes all the way through September is the budgeting process. So these are some of the legislature possibilities. The 88th Texas Legislature regular session convened on January 10th, 2023, and will adjourn on May 29th, 2023. There's a possibility that it could extend into June if needed. The state has a $32.7 billion surplus in the Texas budget, and the lawmakers are deciding right now how to spend that. Here are a few proposed laws that could impact the fiscal year 2024 budget if passed. First one, this is not an exhaustive list. There's so many, but these are the top ones. Property tax relief by introducing a 5% cap on all real property tax appraisal values, and that includes home and industry. increasing the homestead exemption from $40,000 to $70,000 and the over 65 disabled from $10,000 to $30,000. Increasing the compression of the maximum compressed rate by 15 cents for the tier 1 pennies. Increasing our basic allotment for students by $50 up to $300. Currently, our basic allotment is $6,160 per student. Every $100 increase to that basic allotment costs the state $1.4 billion. To keep up with current inflation rates, it's been calculated that the basic allotment should actually be increased by $900, not by $50. Moving, another one is moving the attendance-based funding to enrollment-based funding for some allotments, not basic allotment, not basic. But for some of them, such as GT, CTE, special ed, and dyslexia. Teacher salary increases with no clear funding mechanism, and then school safety requirements with a small amount of funding. So every Texas school district is in a unique situation of creating a budget based on laws that will change during the budgeting process. We are a conservative district, and we will work diligently to present a comprehensive budget to you in June for adoption. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I got two related to recapture. You thought in about the homestead exemption. Are we charged recapture based on those values that are from the homestead exemption? Are we still on that, on those valuations on the homestead? Are we still?
Well, we bring in, we have tax revenue from homesteads.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they increase the homestead exemption, it's going to be less money that the district brings in as tax revenue, which then would actually lessen our recapture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We won't be getting as much, so therefore we won't be getting as much.
And then the other question I've been hearing around is you can reduce your recapture by lowering the tax rate. Is that true or false?
Well, I mean, if you bring in less taxes, your recapture is less. That is true. Yeah, but the amount of money you're bringing in is less.
I thought the recapture was based on your values,
Valuation.
appraisals.
It is.
That's also based on what you're taxing at.
We're taxing at that amount. So if our valuations are lower, our taxes are lower, or that we receive are lower, our tax revenue is lower.
But we as a district are penalized with no matter what for homestead exemptions. Could you state that, please, about the homestead exemption amount? It still counts against us.
Right, if the homestead exemption increases, we receive less tax revenue.
But for the recapture purposes, if like
It's the total amount,
it's the total amount of the
reduced amount.
Yes,
excluding the homeowner may get the discount, but we
don't.
still have to pay that amount.
Yes.
Okay.
Our valuation is
Okay,
still,
sorry.
she's right.
I didn't say it correctly, but I was trying to get.
No, you got there.
You did.
I was trying to get there.
Thank you so
I would
much.
know what they're about. You guys up there.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll go to item 7E, District Operations Update. Dr. Bomley, are you also going to be discussing 10A, campus safety and security? So,
Do it together?
yeah, let's go ahead and do that, board, if we could do that together. So, and Ms. Gilbert, if I could say, go ahead, 7E, District Operations Update, as well as, we'll take them both in conjunction. 10A, discuss campus safety and security protocols. Okay.
2 times. Make it all last. All right, good evening, Board President Yonda, Board of Trustees, Dr. Jackson. The first piece is pertaining to the fine arts trailer and tractor and box trucks. There should be a packet on your table with the header of Operations Board Update. This is just an FYI, just providing an update on where we are on that process, and really just to allow you to ask any questions that you may have. But we proceeded in getting started on getting the trailer off the ground. Provided the amount there of $149K. And then if you go and start to look through the packet, you can see exactly the process that the company that we're using goes through as far as finding these used trailers and then totally refurbishing the product
And we're very excited. I worked alongside Mr. Burke and his team to make sure we identified all the different areas that we wanted to ensure that were part of the trailer. So that's there, and we anticipate the delivery of the trailer really this time next year. So that's kind of what we're looking at as far as timelines, right? And that's good.
Sadly, that's
good. That's good. Moving to the second box there pertains to the rental component as far as the tractor part. You guys had discussions on seeking a company to support us on that, and so Clark Freight Lines is the vendor that we've been in discussion with, and I just kind of provided you an overview of what that cost would be for us. And this is on the steep end. We went aggressive as far as events and playoffs and different items there on what that would look like annually to support and have a driver that would drive the tractor. And obviously, we would not have to purchase that part of it. And then lastly, the box truck, as pertaining to our current box trucks, which are 2 of those, getting graphics put on those and wrapping those, that will be complete this June. We're working with Copeland, a local vendor, on getting that together with some graphics, and obviously Mr. Burke is heading that up. So we should have that wrapped up in June. And the reason why that's June is because we use them, and they need them for a period of time to obviously get that work done. So June is the first available time to get that done. Any questions on?
Can y'all make sure y'all let me see those wraps before y'all do it? If people like them, they're gonna love us, and if they don't like them, they're gonna blame me. Thank you, Mr. Burke.
Dr. Brahma, do you guys like on refurbished trailer, do they give you like a year range? Is that gonna be a 30-year-old trailer, right?
Yes, and I'm sorry I don't know those. I can get that to you. But he did, the gentleman that we've been working with does give you a range.
Got it.
And I don't know off the top of my head, but I can get that to you.
But this is all in price. That's not just the trailer. That's like wrapping, the retrofitting, everything.
Everything.
Okay.
It's going to have, and obviously you can go through it, but it's going to have an electrical ramp on it. It's very nice. And I try to provide as many pictures, and even some of the surrounding districts that use it. A lot of the districts around us went through this vendor and so forth. So we're pleased with it. Okay, so I'll shift over to the next piece of end of year. You're good.
He wanted to answer a question, but then he didn't want to answer.
Any questions on the box truck or any of that?
Was there something he was excited to share?
Anything, Matt? You good? Okay. Obviously, with recent events in Nashville, campus climate in regards to threats and rumors and so forth are all over the place. And obviously, that's not just Porte ISD and the safety network right now. Every campus is experiencing just dealing with chasing ghosts, in opinion, right? And trying to ensure that we've got protocols in place that get us in line with ensuring that our campuses are safe and our students feel that way. So I just want to spend a little time tonight talking through our approach from the district level into a campus level and how we respond to a general threat. I think it's important to note that you have to look at it in a lens of what type of threat are we receiving. In most cases, recently it's been a lot of hearsay. I heard this, and what that does, that really falls into the unknown of immediate danger, because you have to initiate an investigation to get more facts, right? And our campus administrators, going back this last week and even up to today, obviously do a phenomenal job of gathering that information and ensuring that they're looking into every inch of whatever has been put in front of us. But generally speaking, when you look at threats, obviously you have to ask the question, is there an immediate danger to whatever threat that may be? And then if there is, and you can kind of see the flow chart up there, you're going to initiate some sort of response. Campus level, we have what we call standard response protocol. That's your hold, your secure, your lockdown, all those things that you've heard before. We would get into something along those lines, whether we need time to find out more information or we know for a fact that we have a threat imminent on one of our campuses. Right? We would initiate that. Our campuses are trained to do that. Our principals, our safety officers, and our safety teams respond to that. Part 2, you have the legal component, your SRO presence, our connection to the local PD. They are also involved in that through all the mechanisms that I've shown you through past board meetings with our Navigate 360 and even moving on with panic systems. All those things are in place. Communication alongside that would be dire and that would get out immediately depending on what we're dealing with. But in most cases, we live in the no side, right? The side of we need more investigation, or we need to perform what we do in our district and across the state, threat assessments, right? We have active threat assessment teams on every campus that are trained to perform those different things. So just to give you a general kind of overview, does the threat pose a real risk? That's where the assessment comes in, and those teams spend time breaking that apart. If it does, we obviously gather details. These investigations in some cases take all day, sometimes they take several days. And then we need to determine the harm and what do we need to do based off student code of conduct, discipline, so on and so forth, moving forward. Or no, when we've looked into that, we've not found any factual evidence that leads us to believe whatever this threat was has any credibility to it. We don't stop necessarily supporting whatever kids are a part of that. Now, they become a part of that threat assessment process, and now there's a case load on that kid, and obviously there's support plans put in place. But generally speaking, the bottom line is, if something is brought to an administrator in this district, action immediately starts. And we get into models like this that ensure that we're looking into every inch of whatever it is that is presented to us. So we all know end of year, it's just a crazy time. It doesn't matter. The CNI group got up here and talked about STAR and being tired and needing more support. It's just natural for everybody to, crawl into summer, as we like to talk about it. So as a district, we're trying to increase what we're doing and really kind of enhance some of our current protocols. All these things are being done already, but obviously we're going to meet with our campuses to ensure that we enhance what we're doing. Increased police presence, working with Novasad and LPPD to get more presence on campuses now throughout the district. We are also, with Dr. Jackson, working on to get permanent additional SROs. We've started that process again, working with Sergeant Novasad and the Chief of Police to try to get that going, to get more bodies in our buildings. We want to do that. It's not about a want or an allocation of funds. It's about getting people to do it. The PD is struggling itself to get people to them, to staff themselves, and then obviously us robbing them in a sense. That has been the struggle. But please note that the active seeking of trying to do that has not stopped. Increased campus sweeps. Through our current practices, we sweep doors every period. That's being done, but we're going to enhance that. We're going to really identify specific people every period, whether it be administrator, whether it be aides, whatever it may be through the campuses, to live during that period, moving throughout the hallways. A lot of times we have duty stations in place, but we have meetings and we get moved to this and that. But these individuals will be allocated to literally be a part of sweeping the halls and making sure kids are not where they're not supposed to be. Obviously, the big target being the secondary campuses. It's not as bad as an elementary because it's controlled, but our secondary campuses are the weakness for that. So we'll be enhancing that. And then lastly, specifically for secondary, would be restroom practices. Getting back to the 10-minute rule, right? First 10-minute, last 10-minute. Kids are not using the restroom, so now we know we got to meet at 25 minutes, essentially in high school, to be able to manage who's in the hallway. Why are you in the hall? Do you have a pass? And so on and so forth. So those are standard practices. Yes, sir.
Say, Dr. Bromley, if you don't mind, and I appreciate you taking your time to go through this. But some of these things, Board, we wanted to bring to your attention because we implement this tomorrow. People are going to start calling and saying, wait a minute, why can't my kid go to, we're in the last 6 weeks of school, and so we've got to, desperate time calls for desperate measures. And so there's going to be an outcry of why my kid can't go to the restroom right smack in the middle. Am I right, principals? Right smack in the middle of it. And so I just want to make sure that everybody hears. You're going to probably get some calls about that because it's gonna move some cheese for some people.
We're not preventing them to go to the restroom. They
No,
just got a certain time.
But it's the timing of it. But those things are going to create some angst with some people.
So on the secondary level, are they actually able to use the restrooms during the break? Or is it, okay, so during that
People
break?
are in the hallway during that process.
Okay,
Yeah.
but they limit the number of students that can go in at a time?
Yes, and we've got people monitoring the hallways, whether it be security assistants or administrators.
So what about, for instance, our female students who are waiting in line
They have.
and?
Yeah, we won't
Take care of that.
Yeah, and if there's an emergency, the idea is obviously to eliminate as much as possible so
Right.
we can control who's out
Take care of
there.
it.
Yeah, but obviously if there's a line, we're going to allow them to get in, or if we we need to work with them to do that.
And a young lady that comes in the, you know, that's not in that prescribed time. If someone has something, we'll take it.
And I'm assuming based on probably the need, if there's an emergency pass or something that a student may have that I need to go to the restroom when I need to go, there's some arrangements made for that.
And then lastly, reporting reminders, spending some time again, and we've done a lot of this already, but emphasizing anonymous alerts. You know, what I will say, campuses have great relationships with our kids. If it wasn't for our kids, half the stuff we wouldn't even know about. And it's about empowering them and getting back to explaining to them how important they are, because they always know whatever is happening before we do. If you see a video, or if you see something, or if you hear something, please come to us. You know, obviously it's campus administration, so then we can start that process that I showed you in the beginning, and that is critical. So we're going to work on that, and even further communicating that back out to parents, just to kind of explain what that looks like, and how that's being used on our campuses, and when and by every means, when an alert comes in, not just campuses get that, we get it, so we ensure that all those things are being looked into. It's a shared responsibility. You know, the tough thing about safety is you're constantly beating yourself up to say, what are we doing new? But the reality is it's about being great at what we do every day. I've said 100 times to everybody up here about it's human behavior. It's trusting each other. You know, Ms. Alfaro talked about the culture component and being able to connect with our kids, and that's what we got to do. So we understand the importance of it. It always will be our number one priority, and obviously we understand that as we're closing out the year to kind of enhance that to get us into summer. Any questions for me?
Dr. Rama, you mentioned, I might have dreamt this, but I think you said something, I was really excited, you had so many different things you guys implemented throughout the summer, when you came right now. Was one of them like had to do with their name badges, being able to have some kind of essentially like a panic button where if something were to happen?
So for the new bond, that will be a piece.
Okay, so it's still, okay.
And that would be all age, all grade levels?
It would be teachers.
Oh, teachers,
Yeah, it would be teachers that have that.
but at every school?
Yeah, all schools.
Thank you, Dr. Bryce.
Thank you, Doc.
Go item 8, board officers report, a trustee continuing education hours report. So I get to read off the board member required continuing education training report. Some background information on the State Board of Education rule, completing required continuing education each year of service is a basic obligation and expectation of any sitting board member. The board member is required to announce the name of each member who has completed, exceeded, or is deficient in meeting the required continuing education. Before I read off the report, I do want to mention in the backup materials, there was an update. Trustees Melissa Crutcher and Danny Haynes did complete the local district orientation. Credit date was March 20th of this year, so it was not updated in the backup packet, but for everyone y'all both completed it, so, okay. So just want the record to reflect that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the names of the board members just to kind of give you, I'm just going to say tier 1 hours, whether completed or not completed. Tier 1 hours is orientation for new members or legislative updates for experienced members. Tier 2 hours is team building with the board and the superintendent. Tier 3 hours is board development, and Tier 4 hours is evaluating and improving student outcomes that's biannually required. David Yonda, Tier 1 completed, Tier 2, 3 hours, Tier 3, 30.25 hours. Tier 4 hours completed. Russell Shoppy, Tier 1 hours completed, Tier 2 hours 3, Tier 3 hours 10, Tier 4 hours not completed. Jeff Martin, Tier 1 hours completed, Tier 2 hours 3, Tier 3 hours 17, Tier 4 hours completed. Melissa Crutcher, Tier 1 hours completed, Tier 2 hours 3, Tier 3 hours 25, Tier 4 hours completed. Danny Hanks, Tier 1 hours completed, Tier 2 hours 3, Tier 3 hours 18, Tier 4 hours completed. Chris Murdoch, Tier 1 hours not completed, Tier 2 hours 3, Tier 3 hours 10, Tier 4 hours not completed. Deanne Thompson, Tier 1 hours completed, Tier 2 hours 3, Tier 3 hours 71, Tier 4 hours completed. The hours shown above are for the period beginning March 31st, 2022, which is the end date of the last board officers report, and ending April 4th, 2023. Board, any questions or anything on that? Okay. Okay, we'll go to item 9, consent agenda. A, determine and approve any consent agenda items. B, approve board meeting minutes. Number 1, regular board meeting minutes, March 7th, 2023. C, receive principals' reports. Number 1, Early Childhood Center. 2, Bayshore Elementary. 3, College Park Elementary. 4, Heritage Elementary. 5, Jenny Reed Elementary. 6, LaPorte Elementary. 7, Leroy Rizzuto Elementary. 8, Lomax Elementary. 9, James H. Baker 6th grade campus. 10, LaPorte Junior High. 11, Lomax Junior High. 12, LaPorte High School. 13, Bill DeWalt High School. D, receive financial reports for March 2023. E, receive human resources report. F, approve budget amendment. And I'm not going to pull that this week. G, approve 2023-2024 instructional materials allotment antique certification. H, approve agreement for Scaling for Success grant partnership.
Can we pull that, please?
Okay. I, approve employment of professional staff. J, approve term and non-certified contract recommendations for certified teachers, administrators, and professionals in pay grades 1 through 7. K, adopt the resolution number 2023-10 for participation in the Central Texas Purchasing Alliance, CTPA, through an interlocal agreement. Please pull. Okay. Pull K, please. L, authorize the superintendent to approve hiring of contract professionals of director level or below on the district's pay scale from April 12, 2023 to August 18, 2023. Mr. Shoppy, if you don't mind reading back the consent agenda.
A, B, C 1 through 13, D, E, F, G, I, J, and L.
Okay, seek a motion.
Make a motion.
Mr. Martin made a motion.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Shoppy. Call for the vote. It is passed unanimously, 6-0. Okay, we go to H. Ms. Thompson, 9H.
Yes. Ms. Alfaro spoke to some of this and helped me to understand, but I think it's important when we talk about mental health and parental involvement and children's relationships at school with our leaders, that it's important that we continue these type of initiatives. But I also think it's important that the public understands that we do pay some of this. There is a myth or a misnomer out there that these people, that we do not pay. So I'd bring your attention to number 9 on the attachment there that spells out our expenditures for this very important program, none of which I object to. I am just trying to make sure that all this gets on the record, that we are making an investment in the mental health and well-being of our students and staff at every campus. And if this grant goes through, I think it's going to be great to offer additional support at Baker and a full-time person, if I heard you correctly, at Bayshore.
Yes, ma'am.
And then you said there would be sharing between the remaining elementaries?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And we're looking at additional funding options to see if maybe we can expand that even more. We're just not sure yet.
Okay. So these expenditures as laid out in number 9 are should the grant go through, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, so if the grant goes through, then we pay a lower amount the first year, we pay a little bit more the second year, and the third year and then on, we pay $25,000 per position. So instead of paying, a teacher's salary starts at $60,000.
Right.
So instead of paying that full-time position, the most we're paying for any one position is $25,000 per year.
And how long is this grant?
The grant they're working on right now, I believe, is a 3-year grant, and CIS works on a grant every cycle, and so every year we have opportunities. So this just happens to be that we want to expand, and then we're getting ready to put a grant in. Like, yes, we want some more.
Yes.
And they're like, yes, we'll support you, and so we really hope that the grant goes through. So again, we even get more bang for our buck to support kids. But, even if you look at $25,000 per position and the resources they provide, that's a valuable resource for our campuses.
Is this like, if we were to have, say, hypothetically, we want to add more, does it have to wait a full annual cycle, or could that be done later on, in a couple months? I mean, how would that work?
It would just be us reaching out to CIS and saying, look, we would like to add another position. And so it's just working with them to see whether or not they have funding where they could give us a lower cost or not. So they're willing to work with us at any point we say, hey, we want to add more support.
Gotcha.
It just works out the best when you can do it at the regular budget cycles. But no, at any point we can say, hey, we want more, and if we can find the funds for it, they're going to help us out to help kids.
And Viola DeWalt does not have one?
We are looking at options. Okay, we are looking at options to how we can then support all. That's why I said if we're looking at additional funding, if we can find those funds, and we're looking at options, that we're looking at a way to also support Viola DeWalt. So yes, we realize that need as well.
Yeah. Okay.
But as Ms. Alfaro said, again, CIS is one part of our overall plan, so we're going to make sure that they're taking care of it. And it made us meet with this program, but we're making sure that we feel like they have the resources they need. And also, even if that person is dedicated solely to LaPorte High School, that doesn't mean we can't, they can't say, hey, can you go over there and support a little bit over here. CIS is very flexible with us in helping support kids. Okay. And so even when we talked about sharing campuses, they're like, okay, for their grant, they have to say one particular campus, but they're on board with us and how can we make this work?
Okay, awesome.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you.
Board, any further questions? Okay. Seek a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Shoppy,
I'll second.
seconded by Ms. Thompson. Discussion board? If not, call for the vote. Is passed unanimously, 6-0. We go now to item K, adopt the resolution number 2023-10, participation in the Central Texas Purchasing Alliance, CTPA, through an interlocal agreement. Mr. Hanks?
Yes, I just wanted to know if what are the program inclusions that are involved in, I know it takes us and it consolidates us with other districts for buying power, correct? So we leverage our size to get better prices. Is there a rebate system, or is it, deviations? Is there a reduction in the cost to us? What's the benefits of the program is really?
Right, the benefits is that we can piggyback on other districts.
It's really just, okay, so it's just to leverage our
Right.
size.
Exactly, so yeah,
And what's included in their negotiations? Is it perishable goods? Is it like supplies? Is it services?
it's everything. It's across the gamut. So if all of these 130 plus school districts, anything that they've bidded out, that they followed the bidding laws through Texas, they are part of the co-op, and so we can use their bids if we need to. We won't always do that, but if we can feel like but it's another place for us to be able to go to see, is there opportunities for us to use a vendor that might be more beneficial to us and save us time and effort if they've already done it.
Okay. Have we participated in this program before?
This will be the first time that we have participated with this co-op alliance, but we are part of many co-ops.
That's all.
It's also one of the permissible methods for purchasing, so that you don't have to go out for a bid every time you're buying pencils or something like that. So it's a good way for purchasing items like that you purchase on a regular basis
you purchase through the co-op, and the co-op does the bids and gets the good deal, so
The idea is it pays for itself through the savings.
Right.
hopefully.
It is only,
No, I was just curious as to how it works on this side of it, so, good, thank you.
Okay, board, any further questions? Okay, I seek a motion.
Second.
Second, did I already say that? I think maybe, I don't know. Losing track, I've been up since 2:30. Okay. Hanks and then, Ms. Thompson, call for the vote. Okay, it's 6-0, you pass unanimously. Okay, we go to item 10B, adopt a resolution number 2023-09, submitting a nomination for the 2023 Texas Association of School Board Superintendent of the Year. I had asked for this to be on the agenda. This is not something that Dr. Jackson had requested or anything like that. That's totally on my volition here. And
I'll pay you later.
this is actually the first year he'd be eligible for this. One of the requirements is you have to work in the district for at least 3 years since the hiring, and that we're approaching that now. So by the time they get to the awards, which is usually in September during the conference, it'll be 3 years. Given the fact that he was hired during the global pandemic, and despite all the challenges that are coming in during that time, he has done so many wonderful positive changes. And so I think he is definitely deserving to be nominated for this award. I have to say, and I'll be greatly amiss if I did not say this, I got the help from Adam Holland, who has really helped me get through with going through the resolution requirements and the board president letter and getting that information, and I would not have been able to even get close to presenting this to y'all at tonight's meeting without his help, so I really appreciate it. And so, board, if you have any questions concerning it, I'll entertain any questions.
I agree with everything you said.
Okay.
Really find out until September?
Well, I think it goes to Region 4.
Just to Region 4
And
first.
then, I'm not sure the timeline of when they decide Region 4, who's there. June, July.
Yeah.
And then if it goes in, then it goes in a kind of final pool, then they'll select at the September, I think it's in Dallas this year.
yeah, they did it when we were there.
Conference, yeah,
Yeah.
so, okay. Last time we've done something like this as a district was in 2014, so it's not often we do this, so. But with that, board, I'll ask for a motion.
So moved.
Ms. Thompson, made the motion, seconded by Mr. Hanks. Call for the vote. It is unanimous, 6-0. Thank you, board. Also, don't leave yet, because you do need to sign the resolution. Candace, you have a copy of that, right? Okay.
If the kids in the district got to vote, he'd get it automatically.
Yeah, so, so,
Thank you, board. If that wasn't a unanimous decision, I think I'd have to run out of here in embarrassment. But thank you, board. I'm most appreciative and humble. Thank you.
and with that, we'll go to item 11, action on closed session items. We do not have any, so we go to item 12, closing comments of the board trustees and superintendent. A, attendance at recent district and community events. B, announcement of upcoming district and community events. C, outstanding performance by district staff and students. Board, do y'all have any comments?
You always have something to say. I just want to, reiterate what Mr. Yonda just said. Doc, and you're a generational leader. I've been around leadership for a very long time, and you're definitely someone that transcends and has brought a energy, a spark to this community. And I just appreciate your leadership, and I think that honor would be fitting for you. Be looking out for your Project Grad fundraisers. A lot of those are starting to pop up on social media. It's a great thing for our seniors. We've got our last BAM meeting for the year is taking place at LaPorte Junior High next Monday. These young men are going to learn how to tie a tie and how to behave themselves and why reputation is important. So if anybody wants to stop by there. We've got a lot of first team all district nominations across the board in all sports. The varsity treble choir took home the sweepstakes. The LaPorte band percussion is state bound. So there's just a lot of great things that are going on in the district, and everybody should feel proud about that. And good luck to all the teachers and administrators and our students these next few weeks.
And to piggyback off of that, if you have Facebook, go get Hanks and Hanks. He'll give you all that information on there on Facebook. It's a really good site.
Yes, it is.
Sure.
Just a reminder that Sylvan Beach Festival is coming up, and we're going to have our parades with all our students participating. Really excited to get to see.
Perfect.
Sorry, Jeff. Sorry.
No, that's awesome.
Not only the students participating in the parade and stuff, but we also have our Miss Sylvan Beach contestants competing that Friday night. There's still some tickets available for that if you want to support our young ladies who are going for scholarships. And then also that Sunday, same weekend, Sunday, Heritage Elementary is they're singing the national anthem at the Astros-Phillies game at 6:10 p.m. on Sunday. So it's a late game on Sunday, but it's a televised game. So go out and support our Hawks. Oh, it's this Sunday? She told me the 30th. She sent me a text and everything. Sorry, come this Sunday. Ignore everything I just said. Got it. Yeah, that's not the text I have.
All right, Jeff, everything you needed to say.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, quite a few. No, I want to say thank you to President Yonda. We all certainly feel the same about Dr. Jackson, but it takes the effort and energy to go out and to write that and submit it. It's a big process. So thank you and Adam for doing that. And obviously, it'd be very well deserved. So also want to thank Dr. Jackson and Candace and Manny, the IT department and the maintenance department, and so many others that helped us have a phenomenal State of the City and education event. Losing track of my days, was it last week? 2 weeks ago. But it was by far one of the best ones, if not the best one we've ever had. So we sincerely appreciate you guys allowing us to use the building and all the work that went into that. So especially Candace, having to put up with me. Also want to say thank you. I know she's not here, Adam, but if you could please pass this on to Diana Solis. It is certainly sad to see her leave the district. She's been such a blessing to so many. Certainly don't falter. We wish her the absolute best, man. And these guys have to deal with me once a month. She deals with me on a regular basis. So and she's a special person. So we just thank her for all the work and dedication she's poured back for so long. And then last one, I appreciate everybody here for letting me ask questions. It seems like I get negative about stuff sometimes. It's not that, guys. I'm so passionate about wanting to pour back. I know that y'all do so much. I know that every single campus, every single administrator is doing so many things, and y'all tax with so many new regulations and roadblocks and red tape every single year. So I don't want it to convey that, I sincerely appreciate the job you're doing. I get frustrated because I feel like our job as boards is to help try to make things easier for y'all, and it's so hard because I'm just a chamber of commerce guy, and all the red tape of, district finance, all these things that y'all have to deal with. So we appreciate y'all. I know we don't say it enough. So again, I apologize that y'all have to deal with me sometimes, but I promise the heart, the why behind it is sincere. So thank y'all for dealing with me.
Anybody else? I just want to say, first of all, Terry Cook, thank you for all the work you do with the Partners in Education, and thank you, Jeff, for helping getting that as well program off to the running. I appreciate. It seems like every week there's something new coming out from that program, and I know you play a big part in that, and I thank you. And also to all the principals and teachers and staff. I think, honestly, I did not count with the LaPorte ISD calendar, but I did at my school. It said 30 days out till the end of the year, so I know we're not that far off that number. So I know y'all counting, but I appreciate it because it's one of the toughest times of the year and one of the most stressful. And I thank y'all all for what y'all do and just finish strong. So I appreciate each and every one of you and what y'all do. And so with that, if there's no objections from the board, we'll adjourn at 9:45 p.m.